was a short chapter, not much happened. Ben Weatherstaff came in and admitted that he was the one who'd been tending the garden, and that, yes, he had climbed up over the wall, and that it had been difficult for him the past couple of years. He wasn't able to do it because of rheumatism. And rheumatism is a type of arthritis where the joints get achy and stiff and hurt. So Ben wasn't able to do it the past 2 years. And he had been a favorite gardener of Colin's mom. And she said, if something happens to me, take care of my roses. And so he was like, okay, she gave the order first. And even though he was told no one is to be in the garden, he took care of her roses because they were her roses. And, he loved her in a friendly sort of way. So Colin decided to stand up. Well, he stood up to yell at Ben to come around, but he decided that he was going to stand up, and he decided that he was going to walk, and stand up he did, and walk he did. And he walked and he stood for long enough for Mary to run outside, grab Ben, run back in. So that wasn't, a short trip, because Mary had enough time to tell Ben a few things as they were traveling. So,
And Ben's an older man.
and Ben is an older man and wasn't moving quickly. And so, thank you, Lolly. So Colin planted a rose bush. Now, this is something very useful to know about planting plants. That you have a plant in a pot, and when the plant grows in the pot, the roots grow out to the edge of the pot, and then you kind of get this gnarly root ball thing, which is okay for when the plant is in a pot. But the problem is that this gnarly little root ball thing, which is just like roots, won't support a plant that's as big as they get in pots, because in the pots, they're constantly fed fertilizer, they're constantly fed water, so that the roots don't actually have to go out and get that much. And so you can have this gnarly root ball sort of thing that all it has to do is gather water that's dripped right on top of it. Normally, plants have roots that extend out as big as they are. So if you see a tree that's 50 feet across with its branches, it's a good bet that its roots spread out 50 feet. So that the whole, however big the tree sticks out, that's how big its roots are. I grew sunflowers last year, the year before. And so the sunflowers, they take up about this much space with the sunflower itself and the leaves and all that stuff. They take up about this much space. And sure enough, after they die, because sunflowers are annuals and they live only 1 year, sure enough, when they died and I pulled out the stalk was this big around. As I said, the heads were like this, and the leaves that supported the heads were like this. Sure enough, when I lifted up the plant, the root ball came out about the same size as the head. A little bit smaller, but the thing is that there were broken off roots at the edges, so it was sticking out further, and it may have been bigger than the flower itself. But that's a general rule of thumb, that the plant's root system will spread out about as far as the plant does itself, and that makes them stable, and it's kind of an easy design decision. So it's like, okay, I'm going to make something that's a foot wide, so I'm going to make it a foot wide at the top and a foot wide at the bottom, and whatever happens in the middle happens in the middle, but it's a foot at the top and a foot at the bottom. But when you go to plant plants, you take them out of the pot carefully, and then you have this kind of gnarly root ball. And you have to do something to encourage this to grow. So when you dig a hole twice as big. So, sort of twice as big, twice as wide and twice as long and twice as deep as the gnarly little root ball. And the reason why you do that, you dig the hole twice as big as you need, is that it allows the soil to be soft for the plant's roots to grow. So you have this gnarly little root ball, and if you put it like in hard soil, so you dig out a hole the exact same size as the little root ball, and you stick it in, the roots aren't going to push through the hard clay easily. And because they've kind of been trained to follow the shape of the pot, they're just going to kind of stay in the pot. So what you do is you take it out of the pot, you dig a hole twice as big as you need. And at the bottom of the hole, as I said, twice as deep as well as twice as long and wide, at the bottom of the hole, you put the fertilizer, you put good topsoil, and you kind of, mix it up. And you put the plant in, and then you fill in around, and you lightly pack it, and you water it. And this is a process for planting plants. Always dig out twice as big as you need, twice as deep, twice as long, twice as wide. And turn over the soil, fertilizer in the bottom, water it right away. So this is what Colin does. And, he has expert people telling him, okay, do this, do that, do the other thing. And so you had Dickon digging the hole a little bit bigger because Colin's kind of tired and weak and can only take the little trowel, while Dickon just goes with the spade and choo. So Colin makes these little teeny tiny holes. Dickon makes the big hole that they actually need. Now, there's a story that there's an island in Alaska called Adak, Adak. And it was a military, it has a military base on it. And the military base has been there since World War II, because a base in the Pacific is a wonderful thing for World War II. And my grandfather was in the Navy and probably visited Adak. I never asked him about it. He died a long, long time ago. But anyway, Adak Naval Base, Air Force Base. And there were trees that were planted there because the island had nothing on it. And so they went and they planted trees. And these trees were stunted. And everyone was like, oh, because it's so far north, because it's so cold, because of the tundra, the trees never grew. And so these trees were stunted, and everyone knew Adak for the stunted trees. And so here you had all these little trees, and they were all over, they planted a forest on the island to beautify it. And they had all of these little trees. And about 5 or 10 years ago, so these trees had been in place for 50 years. Somebody wanted to go and dig one up and see what was going on. Do a little experiment. So they dug up the tree. And as they dug up the tree, they saw that the clay pots that the trees had been shipped in were still there. So the trees were put on the island in like the 40s or 50s. Here we are at the beginning of the 21st century, and they dig up the trees, and they find they still have the clay pots. And because they still have the clay pots, the roots can't go through the clay pots, so the trees were root bound. So what they decided to do was they went and they took the trees, they pulled them up, took out the clay pots, planted them. And then over the course of 2 years, the trees just shot up and expanded. So it looks like a real forest now. But so plants need room for the roots to grow. And the roots feed the plant. The roots bring water and nutrients from the soil up into the plant. And they also hold it steady. Because if you have trees that don't have good roots, they fall over. And I've lost trees like that in the backyard where the water table was kind of high. And so the roots spread out well. But the problem is that the roots could only go down a little bit. Usually you think of roots and the roots go out and the roots go down. So it's almost like the tree is symmetrical up and down, but it's not. It sort of is, but it's not quite that much. But anyway, these trees, the roots went out, but the roots didn't go down. And because the roots didn't go down, when there was a windstorm, it was able to lift up one edge. And once it lifted up one edge and the tree started to tilt, eventually it tilted so much that the roots here just broke and tree snapped and fell over. And there was this big circle of dirt with roots sticking out of the tree lying on its side, and it was very sad. Because I like trees. Trees are cool and trees are fun. And you can climb trees. But anyway, that is that.